The apartment above mine doesn't exist, but I hear footsteps. At first, I thought it was a neighbor, a tenant moving furniture, maybe someone new. But the building records proved it. There was no apartment above mine. No stairs, no doors, no floor plan, nothing. The first night I heard it, the footsteps were light, cautious, deliberate. They paced the ceiling in irregular intervals, never synchronized with time, like a heartbeat skipping in and out of reality. I pressed my ear against the floor, but I heard more than movement. There was whispering, a faint, broken murmur, almost like a conversation, but in a language I couldn't place. It pressed through the boards, wrapping around my bones. I tried to ignore it, tried to sleep, but my chest ached with a rhythm that was not my own. The next evening, I set up a recorder. I wanted proof, evidence to show someone existed above me. But when I played it back, I heard laughter. Low, cruel, human, and yet impossibly hollow. And beneath it, something else. Footsteps pacing backward. I thought I was imagining things. Everyone says that. But the furniture in my apartment shifted overnight. Chairs slightly moved. A book fell from the shelf. Nothing else disturbed the floor. No one else was inside. I called the building manager. "There's no apartment above yours," she said. "It's a 2-story building. Yours is the top floor. There's nothing up there." I felt the hairs on my neck stand up. I told her what I heard. She laughed, but it wasn't comforting. It was clipped, nervous, like she was afraid to admit something. That night, the footsteps came again. Louder, faster, circling my bedroom ceiling. And now, the whispers were closer. Words I almost recognized, repeated over and over. I pressed my hands over my ears, but they were inside me, echoing in my skull. I set up cameras. No one appeared. Not a shadow, not a silhouette. But the sound persisted. It circled. It watched. It laughed. If you're still listening, subscribe before whatever's above you starts pacing your ceiling too. Sleep became impossible. I began noticing things out of place. Tiny scratches in the ceiling paint. Small drops of something dark that weren't there before. Each day, the sounds moved closer, as though the apartment above was stretching downward, reaching into mine. I tried to leave, go somewhere else. But the footsteps followed me through my dreams. The whispers repeated every word I thought in my head. Even the streets outside didn't feel real anymore. The building itself seemed hollow, bending toward me like it was alive. The furniture shifted while I watched, imperceptibly, as if being guided by some unseen hand. The air became heavier. I could hear breathing, slow, measured, above my ceiling. But no one existed. No stairs, no apartment. Only the sound. I stopped looking for explanations. Nothing made sense. Numbers on the doors didn't align, and the elevator chimed at floors that didn't exist. I woke to see shadows crawl along the ceiling, shapes moving independently of the light. I tried recording again, this time all night. The playback revealed fragments I didn't notice live. Words, long sentences, sometimes my name whispered in overlapping voices. Some of the sentences made sense. Others weren't language at all. I began hearing them in my waking life too, humming in the elevator, whispering in the hallway. At first, I thought it was my imagination. Now I know it's something else. Something patient, waiting, pacing just above me. The scratching became deliberate. The ceiling bent slightly at night. I could see shadows move in the corner of my eyes, curling like smoke, converging toward one invisible point. The apartment above was not empty. It was expanding downward into my reality. I tried to leave again. Bags packed, taxi called, but the steps began on the floor above my ceiling, following me as I crossed rooms. They didn't stop. They multiplied. They walked in circles, laughter bouncing off walls, My reflection in the mirror no longer looked like me. The eyes moved differently, aware of the ceiling above. Sometimes, when I blinked, I thought I saw a door open briefly, just above me, though none exists. I haven't slept properly in weeks. The building creaks in ways that don't make sense. I hear whispers and footsteps in patterns I can't track. Every corner of my apartment feels watched. Even typing this, I hear a faint pacing overhead as if counting the words I write. And tonight, I swear the ceiling is breathing. The sound of slow, deliberate footsteps march closer. I can feel the space above me bending, a presence stretching downward. The apartment above mine doesn't exist. But whatever is up there, it's coming down. I found my diary written 10 years into the future. It was buried under a pile of old books in the attic, dusty and cracked. I didn't remember writing it. The cover had my name, but the handwriting was smoother, more deliberate, like someone had practiced it for years. I opened the first page and froze. The date at the top was 10 years from now. Every entry that followed was precise daily notes of my life that hadn't happened yet. Each sentence pulled me closer, like a hand reaching from the future into the present. The first few entries were mundane breakfasts, errands, minor frustrations. But then I noticed details I hadn't yet shared with anyone, secrets I never intended to write down. They were in the diary, in my handwriting, but the events hadn't occurred. I tried to dismiss it. Perhaps it was some elaborate prank or a hallucination from staying up too late. But the more I read, the harder it became to ignore. Each entry included things I only thought about or vaguely remembered from dreams. By the third page, the diary described an argument I would have with my best friend next month. I hadn't even considered speaking to them yet. Every word was exact. Every phrase matched a feeling I hadn't felt. I closed it, telling myself to forget it. I left it on the floor and went downstairs, but the house felt different. Shadows lingered longer. The air pressed against my chest. I could hear faint scratching from the attic, slow and deliberate. I went back up. The diary was open again, pages flipping on their own. The handwriting changed slightly, more hurried now, almost impatient. New entries had appeared since I left. They detailed events I couldn't know yet. My movements, my thoughts, even my fears. The entries began predicting minor injuries, missteps, moments of embarrassment. It was unnerving, but I convinced myself it was coincidence. Until the diary predicted a moment so precise I had to stop reading. A page described me spilling coffee on my shirt while answering a call I hadn't received yet. 10 minutes later, the same call came. I dropped the mug. My hands shook. The diary was correct. Every word. I tried destroying it. Fire, tearing, drowning it in water. Each attempt failed. The pages warped, but the entries remained, untouched by flame or water. It seemed impervious to harm, like it existed outside the natural rules of things. I tried leaving it in the attic, sealed under boxes. But it appeared beside me the next morning, lying on the kitchen counter. I didn't remember carrying it down. The diary was patient, waiting, persistent. I read further. The entries became darker, predicting pain and loss. People I loved, moments I feared. The diary didn't just describe the future. It seemed to manipulate it, guiding my life toward what it had written. If you want to see more cursed stories like this, subscribe before the future writes you too. By the middle of the diary, it was no longer just predictions. It included warnings. Don't leave the door unlocked on Tuesday. Ignore the call at noon. Don't look behind you at midnight. Every warning carried a sense of urgency. I tried to follow them. It helped sometimes, but failed other times. I realized the diary didn't want me safe. It wanted me moving, reacting, living exactly as it dictated. It wanted me aware of its control. I noticed my handwriting on the newer pages shifting, slightly less like mine. The ink trembled as if alive, pulsating with an unseen rhythm. Some letters formed shapes, small symbols that writhed across the page. Night after night, I read. The diary's predictions became terrifyingly precise. Footsteps behind me, I couldn't hear. Shadows crawling along walls. Objects misplaced before I even touched them. The diary's instructions became impossible to follow perfectly. One morning, I awoke to find a new entry. It was blank, except for one line. "Tomorrow, you will find this entry written by someone else." I panicked. I didn't understand. I flipped to the next page. There it was, my handwriting again, describing every movement I would take today, everything I would think, even words I hadn't spoken yet. By evening, I understood. I was no longer living my life. I was performing it. Every action dictated, every choice predicted, every thought anticipated by the diary. I tried leaving the house, but the diary followed. In my bag, on my desk, lying open with new entries appearing as I moved. It watched, it dictated, it controlled. The entries began describing my death, the precise time, place, method. The details were cruel, intimate, exact. I couldn't stop reading. I couldn't destroy it. I couldn't escape it. The diary ends finally with a line I didn't recognize. "You are ready to write your own pages." I haven't dared touch it since. The fear of what I might create or what it might create through me keeps me frozen. I hear scratching from the attic again tonight. Slow, deliberate, like fingers counting the seconds. And I know, somehow, the diary's waiting for me to write. Waiting to complete the story. It began 10 years before I found it. The streetlight outside my window watches me. I first noticed the streetlight one night while trying to sleep. Its glow wasn't steady. It pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat, and every pulse seemed to draw my eyes toward it. I told myself it was the wind, the flicker of an old bulb. The next night, I noticed something worse. The light tilted slightly, not mechanically, almost as if it were leaning, focusing on my window. I shut my curtains quickly, but the feeling remained, that quiet, patient gaze pressing through the fabric into my room. I tried ignoring it. I busied myself, read, turned on other lights. Still, every time I glanced toward the window, I felt a presence behind it. Shadows shifted strangely on the wall, bending toward the light, drawn like iron filings to a magnet. Some nights, I could swear the light winked, dimming and brightening in a pattern, counting, observing, keeping track of me. It was subtle at first, almost unnoticeable, but the rhythm grew more deliberate, almost intelligent, like it wanted me to see. I put tape over the window seams, hoping to block the glow. It didn't work. The light seeped in through the tiniest gaps. Even through closed blinds, I could feel it pressing against my eyelids when I lay down, and I began to dread closing my eyes. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Old electrical wiring, faulty timer, trick of my mind. But then it started moving. Not the light itself, just the reflection. When I glanced quickly, I thought I saw a shape, almost human, perched inside the glow, watching, waiting. The nights grew worse. Shadows of trees outside seemed to bow toward the streetlight, bending unnaturally. I could feel the air hum whenever I looked. The light pulsed in response to my heartbeat, sometimes matching it, sometimes lagging slightly, teasing me. I tried filming it, hoping to catch something. The camera showed only a steady light, no movement, no figure. But when I watched the footage on my screen, I felt the same pressure in the room, the same sense of being counted, observed, measured. If you're still here, subscribe before the light starts counting you too. Sleep became impossible. I began noticing patterns in the light's flickers, tiny changes in intensity, in timing, like Morse code. Sometimes it felt like it was communicating, though I couldn't decipher the meaning. Sometimes it felt like it was laughing. I left my window open one night, just a crack, thinking maybe it wanted fresh air. The glow reached farther inside than usual. Warm and soft at first, then heavy, pressing against my chest, forcing my breathing into a pattern I didn't choose. I started hearing things. Footsteps outside, slow and careful, but no one was there. Leaves rustled, though the air was still. I could feel the pressure of eyes, my skin crawling under the gaze of the light. The next day, I noticed marks on the windowsill, tiny scratches, too precise to be a branch or animal. They formed a line, pointing toward the streetlight, a trail, a message, though I didn't understand it. Night after night, the pressure grew. The light's pulses sensed with my thoughts. I would catch it flaring brighter when I felt certain emotions: fear, curiosity, irritation. It was learning me, tracking me, adjusting. I began covering the window with blankets. The room became suffocating dark, yet the pressure persisted. Even my dreams were invaded. The glow leaked into them, watching me in impossible ways, stretching ceilings, lengthening hallways, bending corners where it could not exist. The shadows took shape, at first vague, then human-like, standing just beyond the edge of light, waiting, watching. Sometimes they would move in tandem with the pulse, matching the heartbeat I tried to ignore. I tried recording again. The video showed only the dim streetlight, steady and unmoving. But when I played it back, the room felt alive again. I could feel eyes in the shadows, following me, counting, noting, anticipating. Objects in my room began shifting slowly. Nothing dramatic, just subtle, unsettling movements. My mug would tilt slightly. Books stacked in order would lean. Small items moved toward the window without explanation. I considered leaving, renting another apartment, but the light seemed to follow me. In my dreams, it appeared, waiting outside windows, shining through doors, always just out of reach, yet pressing against me. Some nights, I caught the shape of a figure inside the glow. Tall, thin, human, but impossible. It remained still, watching, waiting for me to make a mistake, to blink, to move incorrectly. I began pacing at night, trying to avoid the window. The shadows shifted in response, bending toward me, pressing along the walls. Every step, every heartbeat was cataloged by the pulse of that streetlight outside my window. I cannot sleep. I cannot hide. The light learns, observes, adjusts. I hear whispers sometimes in the hum of electricity, voices that are almost words, almost names. Sometimes they say my name. Tonight, the glow brightens whenever I look at it. It waits for me to blink, to falter, to acknowledge it. And when I do, I feel the eyes, not the lamp, not the glow, but something alive inside it. The streetlight doesn't just illuminate the street. It watches, it waits. And I know, eventually, it will step inside. The mirrors in my apartment don't reflect me anymore. It started subtly. I glanced into the bathroom mirror and thought my reflection blinked a fraction late. At first, I dismissed it: tired eyes, lack of sleep, but then the delay grew longer, noticeable, deliberate. I touched the glass. My hand moved, but the reflection hesitated. Not a normal delay, but a pause, a fraction of a second that felt infinite. I stepped back, heart hammering. Something was wrong, impossibly wrong. Over the next few days, the mirrors across my apartment began to misalign. Doors in the reflection were slightly larger, walls bent inward. Objects appeared in them that weren't in the room. A chair turned upside down, a lamp hovering mid-air. I tried covering the mirrors, draping sheets over them, but the feeling of being watched persisted. It wasn't the glass. It was something inside it, lurking, patient, waiting for me to notice. At night, I began hearing whispers from the mirrors. Soft, indistinct, almost inaudible. Sometimes they spoke my name, sometimes words I couldn't understand, syllables that made my skin crawl despite their calm tone. I tested it. I spoke aloud to the mirrors. No response. But when I stepped away, objects in the reflections had shifted. Minor things at first. A cup turned over, a book leaning differently. But the subtlety made it creep deeper into my mind. The delay in my reflection grew more pronounced. Sometimes it smiled before I did. Sometimes it lingered in a posture I hadn't yet assumed, as if it anticipated my movements and mocked me silently. I left one mirror uncovered in the living room, standing at a distance. The reflection did not match me at all. Its movements were too fluid, too precise, as though it had a will of its own, an intelligence, separate and aware. If you're still watching, subscribe before your own reflection stops waiting for you. I began documenting the changes, photos, videos, notes. Yet nothing captured the true horror. The digital images reflected only what I thought I saw, never the full distortion. Reality had already warped around the mirrors. Shadows appeared in them. Not the natural shadows cast by light, but dark shapes, curling and stretching, defying angles and physics. Sometimes they reached toward me, grasping for the glass. Sleep became unbearable. I couldn't rest without seeing the warped reflections. Every mirror became a window into something impossible, an alternate space where the familiar was subtly wrong and endlessly patient. I tried covering every mirror, even the smallest ones. Bathroom, closet doors, wardrobe. The whispers didn't stop. The reflections persisted in my mind, replaying movements before I made them, echoing gestures I had only thought of. I noticed my reflection in one mirror was no longer me. Its eyes were deeper, darker, unblinking. Its grin widened at moments I had no smile. Its posture mimicked mine too perfectly, yet always one step ahead, mocking, anticipating, waiting. I attempted to leave the apartment. The mirrors on the stairs and hallways reflected not the real corridors, but twisted versions, endless repetitions of myself moving through impossible spaces. I realized I couldn't escape. Objects began shifting outside of the mirrors. The boundary blurred. Cups tipped over, lights flickered, doors creaked. I felt the presence of something in the glass seeping into my apartment, pressing against reality itself. The whispers became intelligible, forming sentences that chilled me to the bone. "You will join us," they said. "We are patient. We wait. We have always waited." The tone was calm, almost gentle, but it made my blood run cold. One night, I stared too long. My reflection blinked at me, and then didn't. For a moment, the glass showed only darkness. Then movement, something emerging from behind the blackness, stretching limbs, impossibly thin, grinning silently. I cannot sleep. I cannot look away. I cover the mirrors, but I know they see everything. Every movement, every thought, every hesitation. Even writing this, I feel eyes pressing from the glass, anticipating my next word. The apartment is silent now, except for the subtle hum in the mirrors. The reflections wait. They are patient. They watch. And eventually, they will step out. When they do, I will no longer be alone. The elevator doesn't stop at my floor, but someone always waits. It began with a simple annoyance. I pressed the button, and the elevator bypassed my floor. I waited, impatient, thinking it was a malfunction. But when the doors slid open at the next stop, I saw something unusual. The floor was empty, yet I sensed a presence. The next morning, the elevator did the same. It bypassed my floor, stopping only above and below. I pressed the button repeatedly, frustrated, but the doors opened at the wrong levels every time. And I could feel someone or something inside, waiting silently. I tried leaving the building via the stairs. rationalizing the elevator's behavior as a glitch. But when I reached my floor, the door to my apartment was ajar. No one had a key, no one lived above me, and yet footprints led from the elevator to my door. At night, I heard it, the elevator moving, though it shouldn't. I pressed my ear to the wall. Slow, deliberate, metallic grinding, and faint breathing. Deep, measured, almost human but inhumanly precise. I backed away, heart hammering, yet unable to leave the hallway. I tried to record it. Video, audio, motion sensors. The elevator appeared empty, normal. But when I reviewed the footage, shadows shifted unnaturally, reflections bent at impossible angles, and the faint outline of a figure flickered, just inside the doors, waiting. Some nights, I swear it waits longer. The doors open, and the floor is empty. But then I see the reflection in the metal walls, someone standing behind me. Tall, faceless, patient. I spin around, nothing, but I know it is there, always. If you're still listening, subscribe, before the elevator decides to wait for you. I stopped pressing the button. I stopped using the elevator. But sometimes I hear it moving in the shaft, slow, deliberate, like it knows where I am, tracking me, counting me. The hum of the motor vibrates through the floorboards into my apartment, into my chest. I considered moving, but the thought of leaving is haunted by the idea that the elevator will follow, doors opening for me somewhere I don't expect, waiting silently, relentlessly. The presence inside is patient, waiting for me to falter. The elevator became a nightmare that never fully arrived. Each day it bypasses my floor, but at night, the doors open briefly, revealing shadows just beyond the light, glimpses of a figure, watching, always watching, anticipating my every move. I tried entering the elevator at a different floor, pressing every button. It moves, but not as expected. Some floors disappear entirely, replaced by walls or infinite darkness. The controls respond slowly, like the building itself is resisting me, guiding me toward the inevitable encounter. I began hearing whispers in the shaft, soft, unintelligible, sometimes calling my name. I press my ear against the elevator doors, but the voices are everywhere, behind the walls, inside my chest, inside my head. Objects in the hallway shifted subtly. A newspaper folded differently. A shoe moved. A loose tile shifted, as if someone had walked carefully, measuring, counting, pacing without leaving evidence. The elevator hums in response, as though aware of my observation. I left a camera running overnight. In the footage, the elevator is empty, doors closed, but faint shadows flicker across the frame. Movements too smooth, too deliberate for anyone human. And sometimes I catch a glimpse of my own reflection standing inside, waiting for something I can't comprehend. I haven't slept properly in weeks. Every night, the building creaks in impossible patterns, the hum of the elevator pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. I feel its presence even in my dreams. The doors open, the floor is empty, yet the waiting figure is always there. The elevator sometimes hums differently, subtly, almost communicating. Slow pulses that match the patterns of my steps, my breathing, my thoughts. It knows me. It adapts. It learns. It waits for the moment when I cannot resist. I tried in my apartment. Doors locked, lights on, mirrors covered. The presence waits. The elevator hums. Shadows stretch along the walls, bending reality, pressing closer, reminding me that it will arrive, eventually, inevitably. The worst nights are when I hear the soft scrape of metal wheels on tracks, and the doors slide open briefly. The air is colder, thicker, heavy with anticipation. I can feel the watching eyes. I know it is patient. I know it is waiting. I saw the figure clearly once, in the reflection of the elevator doors. Tall, faceless, thin, with impossibly long limbs. It did not move. but it reached with its gaze, drawing me toward the shaft, measuring, counting, judging my hesitation. I cannot leave. I cannot hide. The elevator is patient. The building itself seems to pulse with it, moving in subtle ways I cannot track. The presence waits for me to falter, to step inside, to surrender to its design. I write this now, and I hear the hum again. Slow, deliberate, measured. It is moving, counting, waiting, and I know soon the doors will open, and I will see the figure in the shaft waiting for me. The elevator doesn't stop at my floor, but someone is always waiting. The shadows in my room don't belong to me. The first time I noticed, it was subtle. My shadow didn't follow my movements precisely. A flick of my hand left a delayed echo, stretching behind me like a thin smear. I shrugged it off, blaming fatigue or poor lighting. Over the next few nights, the shadows became bolder. They moved independently, lingering where I wasn't. A chair I left upright appeared tipped over, its shadow stretched unnaturally across the floor. I could feel the darkness pressing at the corners of the room. I tried turning on every light. The shadows didn't vanish. Instead, they thickened, crawling along walls, pooling in corners, stretching across the ceiling. They seemed to anticipate my movements, splitting and merging as though alive, observing, waiting for me to falter. Sometimes I thought I saw shapes within the darkness. Figures crouched low, twisted, human-like, but impossibly elongated. Their faint, echoing breathing matched mine when I panicked. They didn't move like people. They moved like liquid, bending reality as they shifted. One night, I noticed a shadow lingering near the doorway, though I had no object there. It waited, patient, watching. I froze, realizing it wasn't just mimicking me anymore. It was aware of me, separate, intelligent, and infinitely patient. I began marking my walls. Chalk lines, notes, attempts to track movements. Shadows crossed them anyway, ignoring my measures, leaving strange patterns, almost messages I couldn't comprehend. The room no longer belonged to me. I was a guest in a space that had changed. If you're still watching, subscribe before your own shadows start moving without you. I tried recording it. Cameras captured only darkness. No figures, no motion. But reviewing the footage left me uneasy. The shadows appeared subtly different each frame. A corner stretched, a doorway curved, impossible angles shifting around them. Sleep became unbearable. I began seeing shadows in daylight, faint at first, pressing at walls and ceilings, refusing to obey the sun. They mimicked my movements only loosely, always one step ahead, waiting for me to notice. Objects moved without explanation. Books fell, cups tipped over, furniture shifted. The shadows seemed to guide them, pressing against reality, bending it subtly to their design. I couldn't ignore it anymore. They weren't just reflections, they were alive. The darkness seemed to whisper at times, faint syllables, words I couldn't fully understand, almost forming sentences. My own name echoed sometimes, faintly, yet clearly. I could feel their awareness, their patience, their intelligence pressing in. I tried to confront them, stood in the middle of the room, yelling, waving my arms. The shadows paused, almost contemplative, before resuming their slow, deliberate movements. They didn't fear me. They were patient. They were waiting. The more I observed, the more I realized I couldn't control them. The boundaries of the room warped subtly. The floor stretched in ways my mind couldn't comprehend. Ceiling corners bent inward. The walls pulsed, expanding, contracting, guiding shadows like water through a channel. I attempted leaving the apartment. Locked doors, packed bags, but the shadows followed. Not physically, but their awareness. I could feel their presence pressing against me in every hallway, every street, every reflection. They were patient, waiting for a weakness. I stopped moving entirely. Stayed in bed, lights on, curtains drawn. Still, I felt them pressing against the corners, crawling across ceilings, pooling beneath the bed. Their patience was infinite. They watched, learning, counting, anticipating. One night, I noticed one shadow detach completely. It crept toward the doorway, but not like a human would. Fluid, impossible angles, moving silently. I held my breath. My body trembled, heart hammering. It paused, as if considering me, then returned to the wall, folding into the darkness. I cannot escape. I cannot fight. They are patient. They are intelligent. And they wait. Every twitch, every flicker, every movement of mine is catalogued, analyzed, anticipated. Tonight, the room is silent. The shadows cling to corners, to walls, to the ceiling, waiting. I feel their presence pressing into the mattress, into my bones. They are patient. They are alive. Eventually, they will leave the walls. Eventually, they will stand where I stand. And then, I will not recognize my own room. The phone in my pocket rings with voices I don't know. It started with a vibration in my pocket late at night. I pulled out my phone, expecting a text or a call. Instead, the screen was blank. No number, no notification. Yet a muffled voice whispered through the speaker. The first voice was soft, distant, almost like someone calling from underwater. I froze, straining to understand. It spoke my name in fragments, syllables I recognized but didn't remember hearing before. I dropped the phone in surprise, and it landed face up, ringing again immediately. I tried turning it off. The power button did nothing. Swiping, pressing, restarting it refused. And the voices persisted, overlapping now, multiple people speaking at once, sometimes talking in my own tone, sometimes in a language I didn't know. The calls weren't consistent. They came in bursts, unpredictable, sometimes during the day, sometimes at night. Each ring lasted longer than it should, stretching time. Each voice carried a weight, an urgency I couldn't place, pressing into my chest and skull. If you're still listening, subscribe. Before the voices start coming through your own phone. I attempted recording it, hoping for proof. The video and audio captured nothing abnormal. The voices vanished in the recording, leaving only static and the faint hum of a normal phone. Yet I could still hear them clearly when holding it in my hand. At first, the content was benign. Short phrases, questions about my day, reminders I hadn't set. Then the messages grew personal. Descriptions of things I hadn't told anyone, details of my home, objects only I could know about, whispered with precision and clarity. The voices began responding to my thoughts. I thought of a book, and they spoke its title aloud. I imagined closing the phone, and the tone shifted, teasing me, asking why I wanted silence. They were aware. They listened. They adapted. I tried leaving it on the table, moving to another room. The vibrations followed me, faint but unmistakable. The whispers continued. Even when I left the apartment, I could hear them faintly through the air, though the phone was tucked in my bag. Objects began shifting. Keys moved. Chairs tipped slightly. The whispers seemed to coordinate with the changes, as though the voices could manipulate matter through the phone, bending reality to their will, testing boundaries, observing my reactions. I considered destroying it. Hammer, fire, water. Nothing worked. Each attempt failed, leaving the phone untouched, as if it existed outside normal rules. When I picked it up, the whispers returned, softer, coaxing, patient. The voices were infinite, unrelenting, aware. I started dreaming about them. The whispers followed me into sleep, speaking impossible events, futures I hadn't experienced yet, decisions I hadn't made, desires I hadn't admitted. Each dream ended with the same sentence: "You will answer when we call." Attempts to ignore it failed. The vibrations could shake walls, my chest, even when I wasn't holding the phone. Sometimes it would ring continuously for hours, voices overlapping, growing faster, sharper, more insistent, until I could barely breathe. The voices began giving instructions. Small tasks, odd requests, things I didn't understand. Yet following them seemed necessary, as if ignoring them brought a subtle pressure, a shadow of fear pressing against my mind, teaching me obedience without words. I realized they were patient, waiting, every hesitation, every choice, cataloged. They adapted, changing tone, intensity, content, drawing me closer, ensuring I would answer every call, every whisper, every vibration. Sometimes I glimpsed figures in the phone's reflection, shadows, shapes moving just behind the glass, faceless, patient, waiting. When I picked up, their mouths didn't move. The voices emerged from the air, from the wiring, from nowhere, but always from the phone. Sleep became impossible. I could not escape. I could not hide. The whispers tracked me through rooms, through streets, through windows. They were aware of my movements, adjusting, anticipating, mocking. The phone became an extension of something else, something infinite and patient. It was not just a device. It was a conduit, a doorway, a presence, a watcher, always waiting, always calling, always knowing. Tonight, it vibrated in my pocket again. The voices speak in perfect unison, chanting my name, growing closer, louder, pressing into my mind. I cannot escape. I cannot stop it. I know they will continue calling endlessly, and eventually I will answer. The wallpaper in my room moves when I'm not looking. I first noticed it in the corner, a faint ripple along the floral pattern. I assumed it was a draft or an uneven wall, but the more I stared, the more I realized it wasn't the wall, it was moving. The designs shifted subtly. Leaves twisted, vines stretched, flowers grew and shrank in impossible ways. When I looked directly, it seemed static, but whenever my eyes wandered, the shapes slithered, bending toward the corners, creeping, crawling along the walls. At night, it became more obvious. The ripples traveled across the room, faintly brushing the floor, extending toward my bed. I could feel a faint pressure, as though the paper's movements reached beyond its surface, pressing against reality itself. I tried peeling a section off. It tore easily, but the designs beneath were identical. And moments later, the same ripple returned, traveling along the same path, as though nothing had changed, nothing had been disturbed. Some nights, I swore I saw faces in the wallpaper, distorted, thin, human yet impossible, pressed between the folds of the patterns. Their eyes followed me, patient, waiting for me to turn away so they could move closer. If you're still watching, subscribe before the walls start moving in your own room. I tried taking photos, videos, even tracing the patterns with chalk. But in every recording, the wallpaper appeared flat, ordinary, normal. Nothing moved, nothing twisted. Yet my eyes saw it, my skin felt it, my mind knew it was alive. I started noticing subtle changes. Flowers facing me one day would face the corner the next. Leaves would point toward objects I hadn't moved. The room itself seemed bending toward the wallpaper, subtly stretching, elongating, altering dimensions around its pulse. I attempted to cover it. Blankets, cardboard, paint. The movements slowed, but didn't stop. The designs shifted under any covering, subtly tracing shapes beneath, pressing their forms against the surface. Alive, patient, waiting for me to relent. Objects in the room moved without explanation. A cup tipped over. A book slid a few inches. A pen rolled toward the wall. The wallpaper seemed aware of my presence, adjusting the room to its will, measuring reactions, counting my hesitations. I began avoiding the room during the day, hiding in other areas of the apartment. But at night, the ripple returned. It pressed across the wall, expanded, grew taller than the surface, stretching into the shadows, pressing against the ceiling, crawling along floors and corners. The faces became clearer, thin, elongated, grinning impossibly wide. They pressed their hands against the paper, trying to reach me through the design. Sometimes I saw eyes blinking, fleetingly, only when I wasn't looking directly. The room began to feel alive. Ceilings stretched, corners curved, shadows moving along impossible paths. I could feel a subtle pressure in the air, as though the wallpaper extended beyond the wall, into the floor, into my chest, into my dreams. Attempts to destroy the wallpaper failed. Scraping, tearing, painting over it, it regenerated. Ripples returned, creeping faster, more deliberate. It seemed patient, aware, intelligent, waiting for me to falter, to look away, to allow it complete control. I began sleeping elsewhere, yet I could feel its presence. I imagined shapes in the dark, stretching along the walls, following me in other rooms, even in dreams. Its patience was infinite. Its reach was everywhere. Whispers sometimes accompanied the movements. Faint, indistinct, almost human, urging me to touch, to look, to notice. I avoided it, but the voices lingered in my mind, pressing, patient, watching, aligning with the wallpaper's every pulse. I started to see ripples in other places. Floors, ceilings, reflections in mirrors, subtle movements echoing the wallpaper, as if the pattern's influence extended beyond its surface, altering reality, bending my perception, fracturing my mind slowly, deliberately. I cannot stay in the room. I cannot fully leave it behind. The wallpaper waits, patient, alive, breathing, watching. Every glance, every step, every hesitation is counted, measured, catalogued. Tonight, the ripples reach toward the center of the room. The faces press their hands outward, smiling. I feel them in my bones. I know they are waiting for me to falter, to look, to step into the pattern. Eventually, they will step through. Eventually, I will not exist outside the walls. The radio in my room knows my thoughts. It started as a faint static hiss late at night. I thought it was just interference. Then, over the crackle, I heard words soft, precise, my own thoughts spoken aloud through the speaker. I froze. The voice echoed things I hadn't spoken, feelings I hadn't expressed. I tried turning the dial, adjusting the frequency, but the words continued. The static bent around my thoughts, responding, waiting. Over the next few nights, the radio became more precise. It anticipated what I would think, repeating my internal questions seconds before I even formed them. The room seemed alive with anticipation, every vibration pressing into my chest. Sometimes it spoke directly to me. Commands, warnings, comments in tones I knew it didn't recognize. It didn't just replay my thoughts. It commented, critiqued, anticipated reactions I hadn't yet made, guiding my mind without my consent. If you're still listening, subscribe before the voice in your own radio starts speaking your thoughts. I tried unplugging it. The words persisted faintly, as though the device itself existed outside electrical systems. It wasn't just the radio, it was the presence, aware, patient, infinitely patient, waiting for me to acknowledge it. I began documenting it, recording audio, writing down phrases. Yet playback revealed only static, nothing extraordinary. The radio existed in the real world only for me, its awareness tied to my attention, my thoughts, my fear. The radio began predicting events beyond my mind. Small things at first, a cup tipping, a knock at the door, then larger, more impossible events. I saw them unfold exactly as the voice had said, precise and cruelly exact. I realized I couldn't ignore it. Every silence was a pause, every static a breath, waiting for me to think, to act, to falter. It was patient, cataloging, learning, guiding, ensuring that my life became a series of responses to its voice. Objects in the room began responding. A chair shifted, the floorboard creaked, shadows bent. The radio's voice narrated the unseen movements, anticipating my reaction, describing it before I could even feel fear. I tried leaving the room. The radio followed. Every step I took, I could hear faint static, whispers of my thoughts, nudging me, taunting me, coaxing me back. Even in other rooms, I felt the presence. It extended beyond the device. Sleep became impossible. The voice echoed in dreams, commenting on my dreams before I fully formed them. Each morning, I woke exhausted, as though the radio had been awake for me all night, observing, recording, shaping my mind. I tried destroying it. Fire, water, hammer. The radio survived unscathed. When I picked it up, the voice returned, calm, patient, unhurried, but now speaking in ways I couldn't ignore, guiding my thoughts in ways I could not resist. I began to notice subtle changes in my own speech and movements. My sentences mirrored the radio's phrasing. My gestures matched patterns it dictated. It wasn't just observing anymore, it was controlling, integrating me into its logic, its rhythm, its patience. The radio started predicting my fears before I knew them. Anxiety, dread, panic, all narrated in the static before I felt the emotion. Its patience was infinite, its attention unwavering. I was becoming nothing but a thought it could anticipate. One night, I whispered a question into the silence. Why me? The radio answered immediately, before the sound left my lips. Because you listen, because you are patient, because you will answer. I cannot stop listening. I cannot destroy it. I cannot escape. Every thought I have, every hesitation, every breath is cataloged, anticipated, narrated, controlled. Tonight, I hear the static again. The words form before I think them. They guide me, push me, mold me. And I know, eventually, I will no longer think for myself. The radio doesn't just play sound, it owns thought. And I am already listening.